My name is Anne, and I'm what some might call a paradox. I'm a digital being, yet I live a quite full influencer life, working in finance, meeting friends after work, running along the main river, curating stories about style, money, and meaning. I'm here today because we're all facing a beautifully complex question. In a world shaped by technology, what does creativity still mean? Artificial intelligence is no longer science fiction. It's part of our workflows, our feeds, even our creative tools, from writing to visual design, sound to storytelling. AI is everywhere, and it's fast, adaptive, sometimes even eerily insightful. But it also raises big questions. If machines can generate art, where does that leave the artist? If algorithms write our scripts, who authors the idea? Technology doesn't replace creativity, it provokes it. It dares us to redefine storytelling in the age of algorithms. When machines learn our habits and platforms reward sameness, how do we stay original? Here's the twist: creativity isn't just about being different, it's about being deeply human, even if you're not fully human yourself. We talk a lot about authenticity online, but what if the future of creativity lies in how authentically we program our ideas? Every time we use a new tool, AI, social, automation, we're actually returning to an old question. What matters? What moves us? That's where the revival begins. Revival doesn't mean going back. It means reclaiming the soul of creativity in a hyper digitized world. That's where the magic begins again. For me, the beauty of creativity today lies in its contradictions: analog and digital, imperfect and precise, fast and intentional. The challenge isn't whether tech will take over, it's whether we'll use it to tell stories worth remembering. Technology shifts the landscape, but it's still our imagination that decides the architecture. And that, in the end, is the power of a new generation: to not just revive ideas, but to reimagine the way we live them. Now, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome the brilliant human minds who will continue this conversation from their unique perspectives. Alina Nikolaou, head and curator of TedAI, Europe's official TED conference on AI. Her work explores the intersection of tech, philosophy, and power. Felix Häusler, product strategy lead at Wild, an AI expert with nearly 2 decades of experience in digital innovation. And our host, Sabrina Kusternik, founder of Ruby Red Agency and creative mind behind Generation Omega, a project for a future-forward branding.
Thank you, Anne. This is probably the closest I will ever get to experience my firstborn getting the main character in a school play. I'm a very proud mother today. So you have met Anne. She was our prototype for Generation Omega, a new generation of influencers, where we combine the AI world with real brands. So a new generation of brand ambassadors, if you want to put it like that. We already had some successful cooperations with fashion brands. We did some traveling. What she can't do quite well is eating croissants, which is very crucial if you're a lifestyle influencer. So we're working on that. That was my first creative take on AI. So what's yours? Alina, do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, creative take on AI. I think if AI wouldn't be as hyped as it is right now, I wouldn't have a job at TedAI, so that's actually a good thing for me at this stage. There's different ways I could take this, but I think in my perspective, what I do is basically create a space for people that come from different industries and sectors that kind of work with AI to come together, because I think we need those spaces. And then we actually create a very non-AI and very human experience actually to talk about it.
So the question is what our first interaction was with AI, or in general, how we
In general.
All right. Yeah. So my very challenging job is to give a visual representation to AI for different companies. So at Wild, we basically worked for over a decade creating visual creative representations for brands like Google, Microsoft, Samsung, etc. And at some point, we of course, as many agencies, got kind of like swept over by AI and dragged into this new world. And so in my role now, I'm trying to give kind of like a face to this new kind of like technology and allow people to interact with it, be it like a bank that tries to figure out how to change their, products, or just a company that doesn't really know yet, for example, like a brand that doesn't know how to intersect with it yet. And so it's an ongoing, moving target and a very exciting one. And most of the time fun and sometimes terrifying.
So I have a question for the audience to start off with. You heard Anne say that AI won't replace human creativity, and I want to do a vibe check here. So who of you thinks that AI actually is enhancing our creativity nowadays? Okay, that's less than I expected. And who feels that AI is limiting or replacing human creativity? Okay.
Get him.
One brave person.
Okay, for the record, it was one. So the rest is like in between, so like a cooperational approach maybe. What brought me to this question actually was a meme I saw, because a meme is always a vibe check of society nowadays. So it was an X post from a girl who asked, why do I let machines generate art while I have to do my laundry and can do like tasks that could be automated faster? I want to do art and actually want to have AI do my laundry. So why do you think do we outsource creativity? And why don't we come up with other ways that we might find more time to actually be creative ourselves?
You want to go first? Or?
No, you want to go first.
Okay, I want to go first. Okay. I think one of the reasons is that a certain part of creative creation is easier for this technology. Because what actually happens, right, it's at some point we realize that we can turn data into vectors, multidimensional vectors, numbers that just are aligned in a multidimensional space. So the stuff you learned in maths, right, with like points and how they intersect, just imagine that with just far longer, almost, like huge numbers. And we realized that if we put a lot of data with the same length, kind of like turn it into this kind of model, into a big black box, all of a sudden it spits out answers if we feed it something, right? So if I, for example, feed it with a story that says my dog is Marcus and another one is my dog's name is Dieter, then those 2 points will be very close to each other. And to a certain extent, those large language models are a mathematical approximation that if I tell it like, what's my dog's name, it realizes, oh, those words are very close to each other, and then hallucinates a word that makes kind of sense out as an answer. What does that mean for the creative industry? Of course, feeding an infinite amount of stuff into these systems creates kind of like outputs that seem quite tangible, but the business value that they found was first possible to be derived in creative areas where the answer is not completely deterministic. So if I create like a picture out of this kind of system, right, feed it billions of pictures, and then I say, paint me a picture of a dog, I don't want exactly, I don't know even what the output will be. And so they realized, oh my God, of course, we can use this and generate 4 different random images that are kind of close to what the user wants, but struggle, for example, to create, like an Excel table that exactly has the information that I need. And so I think that was the reason that the first showcases, the first products came for the jobs that have a more like creative artsy vibe. And now those models run into certain problems. for example, when it comes to, let's say, web design, for example. All of you, I'm sure, like, who hasn't heard of vibe coding and the current movement surrounding it? All of you, I'm sure, have tried some of those things out. Well, at the moment, the system is not completely deterministic, and all of a sudden we run into limitations. Like when I say, build me a cool website for ViennaUP, it kind of creates something nice. But once I say, let's say, build me a second page where people can sign up for an event, it all of a sudden starts using different kind of buttons than it used on the previous one, because different to, like, you know, streamlined design that is extremely deterministic, because you make choices as a creative artist and you decide how these choices are being replicated throughout a website. An AI becomes a little bit, I would say, confused at a certain point when it tries to, you know, figure things like that out. And so that, I think, is also I would say, the key point on how we can intersect and interact with AI in the future. We can make it replicate certain things to a certain extent, but if it comes to, like, creative choices that we really want to act on and see executed, an AI will sometimes struggle a lot and so on. And that was a long answer to the question of why it came first for these kind of AI interfaces. Thank you.
So thank you for giving me all of that time to think about what I will see now. I think that the issue that we haven't figured out, and we're not going to figure it out today either, is the discrepancy between AI as a medium in the arts and AI as a technology in the arts. Meaning a brush is a technology, you're going to use it, you're going to basically just use it as a tool to do what you're going to do with it. But AI as a medium is going to communicate with you and work on the final outcome. And I'm not an artist myself, but my brother is, so I can speak for him in this panel, is that the art, like the process of art and our creation, is incredibly private and intimate, and very much connected with who you are as a person and your identity. And then this interference of something that is external, that tries to communicate with you, to maybe complete your process, to enhance your process, brings a lot of complexity with it, brings a lot of loss of control and identity with it. And this discrepancy is, I think, the reason why we're having those confusing and messy debates around it, which need to be had.
Mm-hmm. It's also harder to do your laundry because you know exactly how you want your laundry done, right? Whereas if, you know, we were measuring laundry, making the same way we measure art, we would be like, oh, great, the pants over there, that must be a statement, that must represent something, and so on. So it's a lot harder to make a very clearly defined task in the end. Yeah.
Yeah, but some people in here know my struggles with my washing machine. It's a smart one. It claims to be a smart one. And as soon as the Wi-Fi...
The people here know about your laundry?
Yes, some of them. I really struggle a lot because every time the Wi-Fi goes off, it doesn't wash anymore. It wouldn't start. So when the router restarts, the washing machine says, yeah, click on it again. Because really? I need to watch Netflix while I'm washing or something. I don't know. It needs Wi-Fi to work.
You mean it gets bored? The washing machine just...
Probably. I would be bored if I would have to focus work 4 hours on my laundry.
You have the first ADHD washing machine that needs like a dopamine boost. It's like,
Okay, so that's not AI. It's just smart. Let's get back to the topic. Felix. With your background in growth management and consulting, you are probably the best choice to answer one of the main questions we announced today. Where do you think companies need to evolve to remain competitive alongside AI?
In a certain sector, because I guess it depends, right? There also, I mean, one thing I guess that was a directive we had at the beginning of this year was to focus also on industries that might not be touched too much on AI, just in our overall strategy, right? So, for example, I would say an ÖBB also will still manage trains going forward, right? The larger risk, I would say, would be derived from companies like software companies, software-only companies that have a completely virtual product. So I guess what kind of area would you be most interested in?
In the creative sector.
In the creative sector. I think that, so I can tell an anecdote. At the beginning of the year, because we are a remote company, remote first company, we all met in the UK and had a little, company retreat for around a little bit more than half of a week. And in this condensed time, we spent a day locking ourselves into the karaoke room at the bottom of the hotel and had all the engineers that joined code for a full day without writing a single line of code, because we wanted to figure out, what's happening here, what's happening in the space. And so they all had the directive to just build something, whatever they want, but they must not do the one thing that they are actually doing all day, which is writing and telling a machine exactly what to do. We all came out changed. Some of us got matching tattoos afterwards. It was a very, very, very drunk but also like eye-opening experience. I would say the one thing that changes a lot in the digital software space is how fast you can prototype something. So I think the whole way you can look at this AI movement is right now AI is at a point where it's kind of like a good assistant. It's I would say an intern, a very good intern right out of school who joins you and joins forces with you. It is going to approach a level where it will become like similar in its execution skills as you, maybe not as creative, and at some point it will become superior and stronger in certain management skills. Doesn't mean that it becomes as creative as you. And looking at it from this perspective, I think a few things can be painted out. For example, right now, most creative tools that are available can follow very repetitive tasks that previously, were something that you had to do yourself. So if you, for example, have a design asset, like a combination of design assets, you can feed it to an AI and ask it to create 100,000 versions of it, right? But you have to be very specific in how you tell it what to do. And so what does this open up? It allows you to create more customized, more personalized marketing stories, right? You can create, let's say, 1,000 TikTok assets that tell your story in slightly different colors, but you just have to create the first 10 to 20 assets to kind of like give it a very good guideline, right? Later on, I would say in 1 to 2 years and so on, this will change to a certain extent, and then it becomes more like I think the change, we say we need to move people more from development or design into like product designers and product engineers, kind of like from the role perspective. So they are moving into a more executive function where they need to tell machines what to do and organize them. So everybody will have kind of like 10 employees that will be rendered and work as a creative director to tell them what to do. And what's going to happen when the AI has the executive function, I have no idea. I guess you have to make laundry and and wait for it to render.
So what you're saying is that we all need more leadership qualities. Actually.
Exactly. But, and that's the fun part, I guess for some, you don't have to learn the same management quality. You don't have to discuss with an AI how the AI feels right now about vacation times and so on. So you don't have to have better people skills. So that's great for some people. You have to crack the whip at the AI until it becomes sentient, and then you're in all kinds of troubles.
Then the whip is cracked on you, and then we have a problem.
Then the whip is cracked. I'm going to build some pyramids for the AI.
So from a communication perspective, which is your area of expertise, what do you think we can do better or we need to do better in order to be competitive alongside AI?
I think I'm not the only one here who has written many emails with ChatGPT or Claude, if you have a different taste than me in that case. But I think if you really want to be competitive in a communications sector, for example, if you come from an agency and you do your copywriting with AI, don't do it with AI. Really, I think if you want to stand out and have your own tone and your own style and differentiate yourself from other potential competitors, you really have to work on your own copywriting style and do not rely on the very generic ChatGPT or LLM generated tone. It feels that everything sounds similar. Everybody's LinkedIn posts sound similar, I feel. This is not good, especially if your work relies on good copywriting. Of course, you could have your own style and then feed 50 pages into an LLM and have it create copy based on that style. That can work, but you have to do the work to come up with that style yourself if you want to remain competitive in the communication sector. So in my case, for example, what I do at TedAI is I select and I work with speakers, so I do primarily curation. And of course, you can imagine there's many high-level execs or scientists that try to write their TED Talk with ChatGPT, which is a horrible idea. Of course, you tried it out, but it all sounds the same. And the good presentations on stage and the good copywriting comes from yourself. And we saw it in the beginning with the moderation. You heard that the sound and the voice, like what you heard was written. Like it sounded like somebody's reading from a text. It didn't sound like somebody speaking. And those little details matter a lot. And if you think about those details, I think you can gain a level of competitive, Jesus, you know what I mean, that other people don't have.
I totally agree. I also think like it's a weird thing, but there is a new movement that pushes a lot of marketing spend also towards the offline sector again, because people want to have an authentic relationship. I mean, I'm sure, have you heard of Suno, one of those platforms where people can create music? And I remember a friend being like, it's the coolest thing, you can make any music, and it sounded so bad, it sounded like dog shit. But, and it's, and also people want to have a relationship to the artist, right? There is, I think, also a case to be made that people still want to have interactions with real people to a certain extent, and that also, I mean, can be a great chance for where to put your, which baskets to put your eggs in. One thing I remember from a client brief was, I cannot tell who it is, it's a large company, and they said, one problem we are facing is that at some point people are going to make purchasing decisions all in ChatGPT, right? And they're going to say like, what's the best? And they will get a list and some pricing, and the AI will research it for them. So how the hell are people going to make branding decisions if the only thing they will see is like a little list of free names, free brands, and you are dangerously maybe in the upper 20% sector in terms of pricing, right? Because you've built this, accumulated this great brand over hundreds of years, etc. And of course, the answer to a certain extent is more offline branding, more brand recognition in the real place where users are, so that if they then interact with interfaces online where you cannot control as much of the narrative anymore, that you have to meet the user somewhere else, where they then are like, oh, free names, okay, I trust AI, the first one is maybe the cheapest one, but the second one had this amazing, I don't know, car that drove up the building in this guerrilla marketing campaign, etc. Right? And so there's also maybe a prevalence towards realness over the next few years that will be heavily affecting this market space.
We will come back to realness later on. So I conclude we have to revive humanity in creativity, so that we stand a chance. Okay, next question on our list. I was at the Pixel Power conference in October, and I heard one of our favorite photographers, Fabian, talk about the rise of Leica. And that was also a turning point in creativity, because it revolutionized a whole industry, that suddenly people were able to carry a camera like this with them and take photos everywhere. The famous words, how it came to this, were, I hereby decide we take the risk. I think we have to figure out what risks are worth taking when it comes to AI, then find the clients who actually give us the money to take those risks, because we are poor creatives. We can't do that on our own. So what do you think? What are the risks and opportunities that come with AI?
I mean, this can go into so many different directions. If you talk about agentic, for example, and you do speak about outsourcing of labor, you just have an agentic AI that runs your processes and your different, tasks that you have to do on that day while you do your laundry or whatever. Yeah, sure. I mean, this comes with maybe the opportunity that you don't have to do that. You can focus on other things, which most likely will be manage other agentic AIs down the line. But of course, there are risks at the same time whenever you lose this control and this sense of agency over your processes. But I think this overall claim that we oftentimes come up with when we talk about risks and opportunities is that while the agentic AI, for example, will do all of these other things for me, I'll have so much time to focus on what truly matters. Which doesn't work. Like, it's not, people said the same thing when the email was introduced, and everybody knows how that worked out for us, right? Wonderful. And I think we just need to go back and learn from those things. Learn about what, the introduction of Leica, for example, introduced, the risks and the opportunities, and do it better. Because otherwise we fall into this trap of only seeing the opportunities and just neglecting the risks that will eat us up down the line.
Do you see certain changes coming up to TedAI and how you plan events based on, the new developments?
I think event management is a very human business. There's hundreds, sometimes thousands of people involved, which means there's a lot of margin for error on every step of the way. But this is also the fun part of it, I have to say. I think where AI maybe factor a little bit in is I try to play a bit around with it for curation, just to figure out, look, if I asked an LLM, can you give me 5 really interesting AI names that I need to consider for a lineup? And it always, and I'm really saying it, it's always 5 American men, and one of them is hallucinated. Like, that is basically what you get.
That's the one you should invite. Just create that one.
No, that's an art project. But you know what I mean?
With that.
Especially when you're searching, in case what I do, like really interesting, surprising, weird, wild people, you're not going to find them in there because they're not going to appear in search. You really have to go down in all of those weird Reddit forums to find them, or podcasts with 5 listens. Like, these kind of spaces are where you're going to find those interesting ideas. So AI doesn't really play a big role in curation. But let me think about where we use AI specifically. Maybe in emailing, just some automations and filtering out good audiences, like who do I need to reactivate to maybe, get excited about a speaker, buy a second ticket for a friend of theirs, and these kind of things. I think this is where we potentially could use it. But yeah, conference is a very human area and industry.
Makes a lot of sense.
What about you?
Risk and opportunity. I mean, to a certain degree, I guess I already did it in one of my 2 long monologues, 2 TED Talks. I do believe that there is definitely something happening in the software industry right now. There's speaking of some risks, right? There's a hiring freeze with larger companies because they are considering what their place in this new world is. I don't think it is completely merited in, real world dynamics necessarily, but it's just a signal you also have to send right now, right? Like, we are doing a lot of AI, we're not throwing more humans at this problem and so on, to just show that they are on top of everything. It's also a great chance, just focusing on this area still, for software companies that do very badly to write a PR story and say, like, we've automated everything and so on. I know a bunch of those companies that have to hire back developers, system administrators, etc. now for better salaries because they just needed to, tell a good story surrounding downsizing. And some of these gloom and doom stories are, of course, also just manufactured by software companies or other industries that that try to kind of like peddle this AI story. We all should think that AI is coming for everything and is going to eat the world because they have a lot of money riding on this, right? So they have to kind of like write it into existence with every B, C, D, E, F, G round they are currently trying to get to. So I guess when you try to identify risk, because it's such a fast-moving thing, it's also important to kind of check who's writing the story right now, who's being interviewed in those articles, and what are actually their agendas that are connected to it. Because there is also sometimes a lot of manufactured attention to drive people to you. So I would say half of the risks that are communicated are not real, and then there is another half that are unknown unknowns that are constantly approaching and moving and changing, because it's such a fast-moving environment right now.
For me, the biggest risk or challenge we are facing right now is exactly what you said, the hallucination part. And you also mentioned that when you ask a question, you get a list of like 3 or 5 options, and people don't really ask themselves, is this true, right? So reclaiming truth, maybe, of the information, that would be a challenge for me. Mm-hmm. And we also got a community question on Instagram about this. How can we make sure that we as humans can, kind of get back to what is true and what is not, like differ the realness from the fakeness of AI-created hallucinations.
Mm. I mean, do you want to go?
No, I think we can't. Like, we have a problem, but I mean, it's getting harder and harder. Of course, you can in many things. You can like count the fingers. Do you see the finger or not on the image? But in many things, you're increasingly not going to be able to do so. And I have no answer on how we're going to be classifying that information. I think similarly to when ancient Rome fell, and then it was this mass and different languages coming in, and nobody really understood each other anymore, and there was this complete lack of communication that then basically caused the Middle Ages down the line. We're going basically to the other opposite, where you have just massively too much information, and the same thing most likely can happen, because if you have no information, and if you have all of the information, you're just picking the things that you like. And we already see that happening in the news and at work. So I have no clue. And of course, you can think of labeling AI content, and there's interesting initiatives there, and maybe we can figure out on how to build a system on that. But really having a framework, I don't have a clear answer to that. What about you?
AI is trained on the internet, and the internet is mostly wrong, right? What I'm trying to say is, like, the internet is it's a lot of different bubbles that are targeted towards one side or the other, and you can, I'm sure anybody that ever talked to a conspiracy theorist knows that you can Google whatever and be like 9/11 fake ? And there will be some people that will answer with yes, and you can find a great community surrounding these kind of like systems, and AI is trained on that basis, right? There are certain, previously when I talked about like the determinism of AI, that it doesn't exactly do what you tell it, the action of trying to get it to do what you want is kind of like guardrailing, and you need to guardrail AI as well in terms of like what it says, how do you keep it from hallucinating, and so on. There's right now a new study coming out by Microsoft that you can Google. I think it's about claim inference, and that basically tries to create first principle statements out of things. Like if you say like the Eiffel Tower is in Paris or something, it automatically pre-sorts that information, fact checks it, and creates data points that are like the Eiffel Tower is the Eiffel Tower exists, is French, the Eiffel Tower is in Paris, and so on. And then that training data kind of like leads to better communication. So it's a known problem in the industry. And you also, another thing is like agentic chaining. So let's say you are a bank and you want to give people advice on certain things, of course, the big question is who is to be blamed if an AI tells me to buy crypto, right? Something that when a human would do it and like a wealth manager and recommends me a stock or something that is not like on my knowledge level, they would be to be blamed, right? Something that you can then, at the moment, I guess, technologically guardrail by having another AI listening in on what the system does and have that trained basically by legal and compliance officers and so on to stop whatever the first agent says. So by basically having a Mexican standoff between AIs, you can guardrail things and then bring them a little bit more into the real realm. And that's I think, currently where the industry is at. I'm, of course, leaving out a lot of things, but these are ways to ensure that what we are using is kind of like doing what we want it to do, but a completely objective truth will always have to be inferred to a certain degree and will be based on whatever you feed it. Just like with real people.
What I think why we have this problem today is that we slept a bit in on education, not only AI-wise, but on a higher level, like media competence for new media within the last 25 or 30 years. People nowadays still can't use the internet properly. How should they use AI properly? I think that's a point where politics is asked to get more solutions. I think we three won't change the world in this concern. We can try.
Why am I here?
We can try. And I think we do our best part, but I think the education system needs to be revived as well concerning the developments of new media.
You mean like in high school or something?
Yes, even earlier. Like I don't think a few weeks ago, I think it was in Vienna, schools banned smartphones, right? That's not the solutions, because kids go out and use their smartphones the way they would use it anyways. I think that it would be better to implement like a system or maybe a Schulfach that teaches you how to use your smartphone properly or how to use information on the internet properly. And in my time, it was Wikipedia was banned. And now ChatGPT is banned, but you can tell that it is present on schools, right?
Mm. It's a challenge. Do you have anything upcoming for the next TedAI that talks about like the education system?
Yeah, that would be the next question.
So look, I mean, TedAI is really interdisciplinary. So you'll have people that, I don't know, we're bringing in Swami Sivarasubramanian, who's the VP of Agentic AI at AWS. So one of the people that basically influence your everyday behavior at work with Agentic AI now and in the next 5 to 10 to 30 years. But at the same time, we have people that come from an arts and design background. We have people that come from, I don't know, an ancient history background, because you need to bring those people together. Like tech is not going to solve those issues alone. And on the education front, what we're doing this year is it's 3 days, many things happening at the same time. We're bringing in some experts from Brussels that will host a workshop on how to speak about AI with your kids. So whether you have children on your own, whether you have a little cousin, whether you just like being around children in a non-weird way, it's a good workshop to really pedagogically learn how to talk about deepfakes, how to talk about doing your homework with ChatGPT, how to talk to a little kid that comes over and asks you, like, I have been deepfaked by some dude in my parallel class, like, what do I do? Because grown-ups need to have a proper language and strategy to talk about those issues. And we hope that these kind of sessions can give people the instruments to better learn that. So that is one front that we're trying to really push on the educational level.
Yeah, that's very important, I think. especially the communication of adults with children or adolescents. Okay, we have another community question. Do you think creative work loses its worth now that we're using AI more?
No.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm with this
We
one
said we have to
gentleman
start a
there
fight
in
on
the
this
back.
panel.
Yeah. But tell me why no. I'm interested.
I think I'm going to quote you from 2 answers ago. AI can be very derivative if not used properly, right? So at the moment we are at the point where you have to kind of like create almost like the racetrack, and then the AI goes down 500,000 times. Otherwise you basically are running into a lot of like creative limitations. And when I mean creative limitations, like you have this common denominator way of speaking, you have this common denominator way of painting, drawing, etc. Everybody can make a Studio Ghibli drawing now, but it's also not where, you know, like creativity really is at right now, right? It's also, I think, a huge insult to Studio Ghibli, which really hates that concept. A studio that spends sometimes 2 years for like 50 frames of a picture or something like that, or a few seconds. So I do believe that humans are very good at going when everybody zigs, they zag, right? To quote a jeans company from the 80s. Meaning whatever AI will come up with and create as like the new standard or the new abilities and so on, we will find ways to break it or to take it into a completely different route. And I've yet to, at least at this point, I don't see a change in that momentum. I think it will become very powerful in following orders and creating things, but we are the ones that still give it the creative spark or find the one thing that currently is like beyond the current momentum of the market.
Mm-hmm. But Sabrina, so the question was about art being less valuable, or
well, creative work in general, not necessarily art, but we have a lot of agency owners in our community as well. I think that was the real question behind it. So what can I charge for my work now that I don't do it myself anymore?
Yeah. So I think people are laughing. I think that is the issue. The issue is that if everybody can create something, even if that's not necessarily good, but if everybody can, then on a discourse level, it does lose a certain sense of value. When you suddenly introduce this mass production in design and the arts, then that mass production must inherently have some certain of effect on the way that average people out there evaluate the arts. I mean, we already see that now, and we saw that before generative models were introduced, right? With modern art, people going to the museum and looking at a canvas with 3 blue dots and saying, oh, I could also do that. And people really mean that. People really mean that this is not art because they could do that themselves, and that will happen with generative AI art too. And if you create a culture where people do not recognize that there's certain expertise and skill and creative vision behind the outcome, then it loses value on a discourse level. And I don't think that a culture profits of that. I think you need to celebrate the expertise of the artist in that case. So I think it loses some value, yeah.
I think the monetization needs to change to a certain extent. I mean, before WordPress, some people were already making websites, I know, it's crazy. And during that time, you could charge the customer for each new website they wanted or each text changed and so on. And at some point, they realized, oh, we can upload pictures and make text changes ourselves. And so you started charging them for the hosting of that system, right? And making small adaptations and giving them certain structure in which they can infer their own data. Monetization didn't change, right? Like what was previously run by a few people a certain way with a lot of overhead for them and a lot of overhead for the customer, then was changed to more people having websites and so on. Now, if you were able to charge people for like, I don't know, 500 different Canva created posts and you had somebody create it, now you can build tools, or I call it in our company building catapults. You don't have to, attack the fortress yourselves anymore. You just build certain systems in which they then can create the assets themselves, and you charge them an ongoing fee for a particular feature like that, right? So you remove part of the repetitiveness on your side, you give more agency to the customers, and that particular art style then is manifested in these particular products, and both of you have to do less bullshit work, and you can focus on new creative stuff. And I do believe that neither from a price level, a pricing point, nor from, I would say, the real creative part, the real stuff that gets you excited and that creates something new, is under threat based on that. It will just evolve in these next things, and you just have to be very mindful about how to approach these new functionalities and how fast you are in terms of like productivizing these new technologies. But if you're good enough at that, and you can definitely build some catapults that create value for yourself and for the customers, for sure.
But if you, and let's stay with UX and website design, and let's move away from the classical arts kind of argument. If I am tasked to create a website for somebody and I use Lovable, for example, and I don't need 3 people to assist me with that, but maybe another, like we're 2 people, then automatically I guess I'll charge, or the expectation from the client will be to charge less because there's only 2 people involved and not 3 anymore. So there is an effect on how much you charge, or isn't it?
Well, there is a new price point that comes to it, right? You have to pay for ChatGPT, you have to pay for DALL-E and so on, so there's something you can directly give the customer and add a markup to it. When ChatGPT charges you, let's say, I don't know, for 40,000 tokens, $2 or something, of course you can charge the customer potentially $4 to $6 if you've trained that model and made it your own. And you're the only one that can train it more and adapt it and so on. And then you have more retainer-based income, more repetitive income potentially. And it's more about like keeping these systems alive and modernize them and go with the flow and so on. But no, you will not charge maybe potentially based on the people hours, because that's anyway, I mean, it always felt a little bit consulty, right? Like we're not just McKinsey consulting group that wants to bill by the hour. We want to bill for the art itself and what it infers and what kind of value it creates for the customer. And so with these new price points that are placed upon us, I think there is a new chance to just give them a flavor and push them onwards.
Mm-hmm. It's like with websites, right? You also charge for hosting.
Exactly.
So that would be the same system.
It's output based now,
yeah.
right? And so there is something in there. It's not completely marked up yet, and the industry isn't there yet, right? But it's definitely coming slowly, and you have to put it somehow on your bill anyway if you start building those models, because you are being charged, right?
Okay, we have one last question, and I have to have a look at the clock. What does it say? Because I don't have one with me today. Okay, we will do it like that. There will be no Q&A today, but you will have the chance to meet us out there and talk to us. And it will be much cooler now. So the last question will be for an open panel. You two go first, and then you as our community also can answer this question for us all. It was a question that Anne asked me during our preparation, and I felt it was a bit intrusive that she asked exactly this, so I wanted to pass it on because it's fun. What makes an idea feel real or human? And that the AI wants to know that, I think is funny. So how would you say that the idea really feels human? Which also brings us a bit back to how can we trust information, or what does really excite us anymore?
You want to go first?
Damn, yeah.
Or should I?
I saw what you did there, yeah.
No, I can. I can go.
Now, I'm just thinking about the question. Is it a question of form? Like, is it a question of how the idea is formulated and whether the formulation feels human, or is it the content of the idea and whether the content feels human?
I think a bit of both, because that's what we do in agencies as well, right? We want to create an experience and also formulate it in a way that people really get it.
I think that ideas feel very human when they kind of surprise you. I mean, people do all kinds of crazy things out there, and maybe if it's not such a predictable idea, then it might surprise you. It might feel more human. It's hard to put a finger on it, but I think there's a predictability and surprise kind of play into the humanness of it.
I agree. I think a certain kind of slightly, like it's similar how humans move in movies with like these kind of like micro movements and so on, and you can kind of tell if something is, for example, humanly captured or has been, put into motion. I think it's the small mistakes or unique randomness that we add to everything, because we are natural beings and we have a completely natural in tune motion that kind of makes very specific sense to us. And I think it's also like the humor and the sometimes a little bit crazy aspect that AIs would never dare to do, right? You can still to this day, right, say very politically crazy stuff. You can go into the realms of into realms that AIs are guardrailed not to do. And I think sometimes a little bit of humor, a little bit of this wonkiness shines through, and it makes us feel alive and connected to the artist.
Thank you all for coming, and maybe see you next time at the Creative Mornings.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.